our meeting. I'm going to go ahead and start with roll call attendance for the board directors, starting with Director Banfield.
Can you hear me? This is Kamara.
We can hear you. Thank you, Kamara. Director Barrows.
Here.
Director Sproul.
Here.
I don't see Director Decker on the call quite yet, but I know that she is planning on being here, so I'm sure she'll be joining us soon. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Webb to walk us through the first few items on our agenda.
Yes, we've got 5 items for this special meeting board workshop. We'll start with contracts, and I'll turn this over to Brett to introduce the items. Brett, you're up.
All right, thank you, Dr. Webb. The first item that we're recommending be approved at the next board meeting is a purchasing agreement number 2020-083 with Granite Analog Phone Service. As you've read, we still have a need, although most of our phone needs are met with a web-based solution. We do have a need for certain analog services for things like fire alarms and elevators and backup 911 services. So Granite Telecommunication is our recommendation to replace CenturyLink at a savings of about $16,000 a year, which will be nice. The total contract amount that we're recommending be approved is $64,884 plus Washington sales tax. And again, that would be to Granite Telecommunications. Any questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to our second recommendation, which is in reference to RFP number 2020-078. This is the equity audit that Janelle Ephraim has been leading on our behalf in conjunction with our purchasing department. As you can see, we received 5 responses. I believe they interviewed 2 finalists after screening the responses. It was a committee of several members of the community as well as the district that supported Janelle in that evaluation. And the recommendation is to move forward with the partnership of Valbrun Consultant Group along with UPD Consulting. The total cost would be $219,065 plus travel costs as needed. I think those are the high points. Are there any questions on that?
I'm curious, I'm not trying to put Janelle on the spot here, but I would love to hear what made this group stand out.
Certainly. Both groups that we interviewed were all presented very well, and we know that both groups would have been fine. However, Valbrun Consulting and UPD, it's a combined group, they really stood out as far as having the expertise that we were looking for with equity audits. They have quite the resume for completing equity audits with multiple different school districts similar to our size.
And what flexibility on the term contract? I mean, sometimes these projects, when you get started, become bigger. Is there flexibility in this contract?
Absolutely. They, when interviewing them, we talked to them about their flexibility, and they said that there's some flexibility around the services, and if we need to make adjustments, that would be fine. But their ultimate goal is to serve kids and help us to best do that.
My last question, are there specific districts that they listed as references that we could see kind of some of the, I'm not saying their work product, but kind of where they've done some of their work in similar size districts?
Yes, absolutely. So you want those right now?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, they could come in the Friday briefing, and that would, I just would be curious to know a little bit more.
Okay, all right. So I'm looking at Tulsa Public Schools, Hartford County Public Schools, but I can give you more an exhaustive list in the Friday briefing.
That would be excellent if it's not too much. Thank you.
All right, anything else on the equity audit? All right, then I'll move on to change order number 26 with Skanska USA Building. They are the contractor, as you know, that have been working on our McLaughlin and Marshall project. You can see that this change order relates to some unforeseen hazardous materials prior to demolition of McLaughlin Middle School, as well as some adverse conditions relating to the smoke from the wildfires. Our recommendation is that we approve change order 26 to Skanska Construction in the amount of $373,888 plus Washington sales tax. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I actually have a question on that, Brett. Can you remind me kind of where we're at in terms of the budget for this project? Because I feel like this is not the first change order we've had for the Mac McLaughlin, or the Marshall Mac construction project. So it says that this will be charged to the project's contingency account. Where are we at with the project's contingency account?
So there's kind of a couple things to that question. Because of the GCCM contract structure that is somewhat unique to this project, although we have it in a couple other projects, there is a requirement that we have a contingency account. And so I think the reference to the contingency account here is within that contractual parameters. However, in our briefing to you all around kind of best case, worst case scenarios, I think we were hoping to get some savings out of that account. With this change order, we would still have that savings, but we're also being prepped that there likely will be other requests for change orders as that project is finally wrapping up, we think. So I would say stay tuned. Right now, we're certainly within the contractual parameters, and we're certainly within the numbers that we've been sharing in terms of the overall.
Would it be
we'll hang on through the last wave.
would it be possible in this week's Friday briefing to get the new number, like that same document that you keep updating and updating? Can we get it with these numbers?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Wendy, just to clarify, you mean the best case, worst case?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
And again, just what I believe, and I'll have to refresh my memory of the details of that from the last time that was updated, but I believe that there was an allowance for this. So it won't necessarily change that particular project, but I will certainly go refresh my memory and then kind of let you know how much slack we have left in the rope to navigate the last few negotiations with our partner on this.
Yeah, just as a reminder, the GCCM process requires us to set aside 5% of the total budget into a contingency. And as Brett has indicated, this particular change order and subsequent possible change orders prospectively would be charged to that contingency. We'll get that updated once Brett confirms the review of the best worst case scenario. We'll get that out to you.
Any other questions on the Skanska change order? All right, then we'll move on to the last one that I have, which is the recommendation to approve the award of quote number 2020-084, which is to repair some flooring at Jason Lee Middle School that is in our mechanical room. As you can see, it's kind of above the band and choir room areas. So I would imagine those folks are very supportive of having that flooring be nice and solid. So we received 3 quotations. The low quoter was Halbert Construction Services of Vancouver. Their quote was $72,100 plus tax. Our recommendation is to move forward with the contract to Halbert Construction. Any questions on that?
I'm just curious what the material of that flooring is.
I think AJ might be on the call. He would be more, I honestly do not know, but.
It's tongue and groove wood flooring.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Brett, I think you're finished, correct?
That's all I had.
All right, there are no policy items. We do have one teaching and learning item. I'll turn this over to Dr. Strom.
We have 2 items here that are elementary school supplemental materials. And I think this is about what we had on our last month's report as well. So it's been pretty light here in terms of current adoption. That might pick up as we move towards the end of the year. But if you have any questions, Darcy's on the call too, because she's worked with instructional materials.
Hearing none, I think that concludes the board workshop items that the team needed to present relative to contracts, policy, and teaching and learning. Madam Chair, I'll turn this back over to you relative to the next topic.
You guys had it easy tonight. All right, we are going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which has to do with the superintendent successor search. And I understand Steve Lauder is supposed to be joining us. I don't see him on the, oh, there he is. Excellent. All right.
We'll
All right.
also, I know Jefferson needs to move Ida over as well.
Oh, good.
So my partner, Ida Buelna, should be out there as well. Can she be added?
Yeah, we're working on it. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
That's it. Yep.
Promoting now.
Thanks.
There, it looks like she's joined us.
There she is. Good. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the time this evening. Tonight is what we often refer to as the first board meeting with the school board. And in this case, what we'll do is we'll talk about expectations for search. We'll talk about establishing the calendar, advertising venues, stakeholder groups, establish some selection criteria, qualities, and characteristics. We'll talk about that. Broaching compensation, and then questions from the board. So the first part of this really is to the board, and we would like to hear any thoughts or comments or questions about your expectations of the process, because this is the board's process. We have a protocol, but the board may choose to change it, rearrange it, or move us in a different direction. So does anyone have any thoughts or questions about process or expectations for the process? Okay.
I think perhaps, Steve, that we're kind of new at this.
Yes.
So, I mean, we are very new at this. And if we could have, I think one of my expectations is like a regular check-in from you about how are things going? Do you have any questions? This is what we're doing this week. This is, what, so just I would like at least like a weekly check-in I would be expecting, so that we kind of keep up to date on what's happening. It may be this week, it's Thanksgiving week and nothing happened or whatever, but just to keep in touch.
Okay, I'm sure we can do that. That's not a hardship. Any other thoughts or questions?
Well, I'll just chime in for my other board members. Wendy sent out Steve's contact info, just that he welcomed our connection, communication, and I did reach out to him today. So I urge my colleagues to do the same if you haven't had the opportunity, because it was a really nice check-in to just get a better sense and get my head around this process. So I urge you to do that. It was a very natural, free-flowing, casual conversation. Some of my thoughts were just really, and I think this came up in our interview of the search firms, was it is great to have a search firm guide us through this process, but wanting to have flexibility within that, given that one, we are a newer board, but also because of the times we are in, the pandemic times, that we just want, or I was hoping for a lot of latitude, flexibility if we need to pivot.
Absolutely. As I said, we have a protocol, but this is your process and you get to be in the driver's seat in all things. So this is the very most important thing that the board will do, is to hire their superintendent. So it's very important, and please feel free to call me. If I'm unable to pick up, I'll call you back. I answer on the weekends, on the holidays, as I told someone. I'm not sure if I said this in our interview. I took a call from the Bend board when I was on vacation in Hawaii. So, it doesn't matter what's going on. I'll pick up and we'll chat and answer your questions whenever you have a question. So feel free to call, email, or text. That's not a problem. Any other thoughts or concerns? Okay, I'll move on to the second item, which really is, at this point, we still are working on a draft calendar. And I sent a draft calendar out, and there was one typo, but the position is posted on the firm's website. Although we don't have all the criteria in there, it's out there. People are becoming aware of it. We're beginning to get interest in the position already. So tonight, we talked about the agenda for tonight. In the months of December and January, we would plan on holding our stakeholder meetings, and these will be Zoom meetings. Pardon me, because of the COVID issues and the inability to meet in person. But what is necessary for that would be the board approving a list of stakeholders, individuals, your equity committee, of course, we always want to include the teachers, the classified staff, the administration, and sometimes we actually even hold a separate one for the district office staff. And so your job will be to come up with that list. And I think that the administration has a list that they have used in the past for some of these things. That certainly could be a starter. It could be something that you use to pick and choose from that list. But it's important to us in the process to make contacts with all of those individuals and groups out there that you want to be and feel part of this process. Everyone gets asked the same 4 questions, so there's no change there. And if people are unable to make it, they can actually answer those questions online on that SurveyMonkey. And that's something we can talk about at a later time for when it's going to be posted and for how long it's going to be posted. But usually it's a week or so during that stakeholder meeting time. People can actually be on a Zoom meeting and then go and do it again on the SurveyMonkey survey. Names are not going to be taken normally, although I have had a district ask us to put names as an option. We normally will report all input except for any profanity or any specific names, like John's a bad person and whatever. So we would delete that. We also provide a summary of the responses, not only for the Zoom meeting, but also for the SurveyMonkey. So the board will have a chance to see all responses, and they'll have a chance to see the condensed version, the summary. a stakeholder report to the board, which would take place after the closing of this process. I have ballparked as January 19th. Now that we're flexible, that doesn't have to be the date, but that seemed like an appropriate date. And as I believe that is one of your meeting dates. Is that's correct? Mrs. Smith, I think I see you shaking your head. That's correct. If that's inconvenient, we can change that. We could have a special meeting. It's totally in your ballpark on that. What we would do at that meeting as well is begin the development of interview questions. We will provide you at your desire or your convenience some sample questions. You can write your own questions if you wish, but the questions usually are centered and focused upon the qualities and characteristics that you desire in the new superintendent. So if it's budget and finance, we'll have questions, sample questions for you for those kinds of questions. If it's instruction, we have some sample questions, actually quite a few in all these areas. So we'll send you some sample questions. If you'd like them and you want to use them, that's great. If you'd like to write your own, that's fine as well. We'll then format that for you and return it to you so that you'll have them available during your interviews. And speaking of interviews, we recommend that you hold at least 2 interviews with each candidate. That would be a stakeholder interview. And then again, that's a group of individuals you would select. We recommend normally having each group, for example, your administration, your teaching classified groups, nominate individuals to you, several names. The board would then select from that nomination those individuals, including students, community members, and possibly elected officials, if you so choose, would then be part of an interview that would be run by an administrator from your end. And that information will go to you. They're not going to rank the individuals. They're not going to select their first, second, third choices. What they're going to do is provide you with the strengths and weaknesses of each of those interviews. That information is then written down and then given to the board. The board will use that information after they have completed the interviews and they've made a preliminary selection. And it could be that they've come up with 2 individuals they want to hold another interview session, or they want to ask some additional questions of these 2 individuals. The board then looks at the input from the stakeholder interview team to see whether or not they had the same kinds of impressions that the board did in their interviews. One of 2 scenarios, either it's a match, which it usually is, or it's not a match. And if it's not a match, the board then has a chance to discuss and rethink their decision about their top candidate or candidates, and then proceed from there. We'll bring forward, by the way, after I did get a bit ahead of myself, but let me go back to the 20th of January was the date we've ballparked for applications to be closed. What we'll do is we'll take about 2 weeks to screen those applicants down to make sure that their backgrounds are clean. They say they are who they say they are. And we'll bring forward a top group of candidates to you that we believe to make that are matched to your characteristics and qualities and needs. You'll see all the applicant names, but you won't see all their information. We will certainly take questions from you about anybody on the list, but we'll have a much more detailed report on those we're bringing forward as people you should consider for interviews. Each of those 5 to 8 could be more depending upon the number of applicants and qualified people that we bring forward to you. We'll also have recorded a video that answers several questions. So you'll see their paperwork, you'll hear us talk to you about their qualifications and what we found in our backgrounding work, and you'll have a chance to hear them respond to the same question, each of those candidates responding to the same questions. At that point, the board should select the number they would like to interview. And it could be that you want to have several interviews per day. In normal times when people could come and do site visitations and we could have public meetings, we would have recommended that you only do one per day. But times are different today. So candidate screenings run from the 21st through February 8th. And again, I will ballpark that presentation of finalists to the board on February 9th. Again, that can change. If that, I believe, is also a meeting for you. I think. I'm not seeing any. No, is that a yes or no? February 9th? I think it is.
Let me double check real quick. Hold on.
Okay.
That one I don't know off the top of my head.
It's usually the second Tuesday of the month, so,
Okay.
but let Wendy check.
Okay.
I'm pulling it off. It's just being slow. Hold on.
Yeah.
It is a board meeting. It's a regular board meeting, yeah.
Good. Okay. And if you want it to be a special meeting, that's fine, because this will be done in closed session with just the board and the consultants, no other staff. Okay, so that, again, I ballparked as February 9th. Interviews I've ballparked for February 15th through 19th. You can select, once we know how many people you'd like to interview, you can select those dates, multiple dates during that time, or 1 or 2 dates. And then again, this is kind of, again, up to the board, whether the interviews are that time. February 16, again, that would be when the board would announce, let's assume you've come up with a single individual. The board would announce the new superintendent pending contract negotiations. And then on your March meeting, I think that's the 9th again. The assumption is the board would have a contract to approve, and the first day would be July 1, 2021 for the new superintendent. But I want to go back to the stakeholder meetings, and I would like to have Aida talk a little bit about that, because in these times, it's really because of our Zoom meetings and not just going out and meeting groups of people. So Aida, thank you for your patience and allowing me to talk so long. I apologize.
No problem. One of the things that I know has worked really well is when the board, or when our point of contact provides us with the names and the groups, i.e., for example, the board is going to determine, do you want us to talk to teachers? Do you want us to talk to administrators, to parents, to students, and any community member, community group, i.e. the Lions, Kiwanis? So long as we have that information, what I do is I space out. I'll do it in a week where I speak to the different groups at different times. The point of contact at the district would be the individual, because I know that depending on each state, there has to be transparency. So if the board has the wherewithal to establish the Zoom meetings, I can send my Zoom contact. But in order for you to have that access, it would be someone in the district office setting up the Zoom meetings, having me be part of that person who has control of the Zoom meeting. And then we would do the Zoom meetings. Both Steve and I would be in that meeting, because one of us would take notes and one of us would open it up and hear the discussion from the group. As you know, in your board meetings, we have people raise their hand, do a thumbs up when they want to speak. So as we said in our presentation, it's 4 questions. Those 4 questions are asked at each individual stakeholder meeting. The important thing is to get as much information as possible. And with your Spanish-speaking community, I would be the one running that in Spanish for those parents. I would also, be taking notes, more than likely have it recorded, so that I make sure that as I take the notes, I'm simultaneously translating. I won't provide you the information in Spanish. I'll translate it as I go along. I've done these in 4 different superintendent searches so far, and it's worked well. But it does require both Steve and I, or myself and another individual for the Spanish speaking, to run the meetings. And what we'll do at the conclusion of the last meeting is we will do an executive summary of those points that come up more than once. Say, for example, our group says that what do they like most about the schools? The dedicated teachers, the staff. If we hear that in 3 or 4 different groups, we let you know that. We're not going to list someone who says that one of the issues in the district is there's not enough classroom supplies. If only one person says that, that's that person's issue, but it's not an issue that we would put into an executive summary. You will see those comments, but it's not going to be when we give you an executive summary of what we found all the groups in general said. I like to do my Zoom meetings in the morning and then in the afternoon. And then when we have a big community one, where anyone in the community can come online and participate in that meeting, and that's usually in the evening after 6. So we let individuals know we're going to have a Zoom meeting. We usually host it for an hour. And we do get some information in quite a bit of information in that 1 hour, because we want everyone to have an opportunity to tell us what they're thinking and what they'd like to see in a superintendent. What are the issues? What's great about your schools? And what's great about your community? Why should someone move to your community, to Vancouver, and relocate there? Or maybe they already live there. So that's pretty much what we do with the stakeholder groups. But again, I would like to see the teacher group on there if you're okay with that. The administrators, site level and district level, students from the high school level, parent group. Do you have PTA, PTO? So we get representatives from them. And then we have, do you have Kiwanis? Do you have Lions? The fire chief, the police chief, say the mayor, council member, those individuals that are important in the community that you'd like to hear from them also. So as you know, Steve and I will work with the point of contact, and we'll set up all those different meetings, and we'll set up 2 community meetings, and we'll also have a meeting for your Spanish speaking community and parents. So does that sound like those are the groups you'd like us to work with?
How many like stakeholder group, how many groups are you looking for? Because I mean, I could think of tons of different groups, but
right, I have a huge list myself.
Having 20 different sessions probably isn't feasible. Like, how many different like groups are you looking for?
So I've mapped out already. I kind of looked at it. I'm looking at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, probably about 14 to 16.
Okay, so a large no. I mean, in my mind, I was thinking you wanted us to narrow it down to like 5 or 6 groups. So there's lots of different groups.
Yeah,
there are.
Yes. For example, your teacher group is 1. Your classified secretaries, custodian is a 2nd. If you have like, I don't know, union representation, maybe union leadership, I like to do one-on-one. I'll give them a phone call. So I have their cell numbers, and I'll talk to them individually. I also, if you have individuals that you want us to speak to, I have time set aside to speak to them. And I ask everyone the same 4 questions. We don't deviate from that. So if I speak to the chief of police, I'm not going to ask him different questions. I'm going to ask him what's great about your community, what are the issues, what's great about the schools, and what are some of the attributes, characteristics that a superintendent should have. So like I said, I've mapped out pretty much 16 different time slots. And 2 of those time slots are community meetings. So they would be after 6 o'clock. And that's where anyone can come in and participate. Now that's also includes the online survey. So individuals that can't make any of the meetings, they can go on online and participate in the survey. And we include that after we include all the information from the different meetings.
So there are 3 venues. There's the online survey, SurveyMonkey. Anyone can get online and answer that. That'll be posted at least for a week. And we'll provide you that information. There are those public Zoom meetings where anyone can come and we can navigate that. And then there is the third venue, the group community want to specifically reach out to a more private session, I guess is the best way to put it, a closed session. And that could be elected officials, mayor, et cetera. It could be the police chief and the fire chief that Aida was mentioning. There can be a subset of those individuals within a private closed group. It could be equity committee, that could be a separate group. And we're flexible. Typically it's 2 public meetings, but if we find that we need more than our 2 public community meetings, if we find that we need more, we can arrange for that as well. But that's basically it. And again, it goes back to the board's desire. If they need more of something or less of something, that's fine. I had a district just recently say, the things are so difficult out there, we don't want any public meetings. We're just going to have SurveyMonkey. So it's like, well, okay, that's your choice. That's not a recommendation, but that is your choice. So that's the way it goes. Again, it's your process, not ours. We have recommendations, but the board can decide to really modify and change the process at their will. So tonight, we wanted to talk about the stakeholder groups, but I don't know that individual board members had much time to really consider them. And so one of the things we can do, Wendy, if the board would like, is to submit some of those ideas to us via email. Would that work for the board? And we'll look as well. I think Dr. Webb had something on an Excel spreadsheet. Mike, maybe you had it. I don't know. I'm not sure who had this group of.
I think it might have been Tom.
It was
Tom.
It was in our briefing last week. It was just some points.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to say you have a list at least to look at. And if you submit your ideas, then we'll compile them and get them back to the board. And then we'll finalize and get moving on that as well.
Steve, this
Yes,
is Kyle. I have one question. I mean, obviously the stakeholder feedback is the critical piece of the process of really understanding the community's interests. And I like the public meetings. I like the smaller private sessions. And I also like that there's going to be an online survey that anybody in the community can fill out. I'm just wondering, as we approach these stakeholder groups, for instance, we'll have a small representative of teachers and a small representative of our classifieds. And I just wonder if there is an opportunity, I'm thinking especially of our building administrators, our central office administrators, to have a tailored survey that we can collect all of that input, not just if you choose to answer, but just really reaching out to them in hopes that we can collect all of that information, as they're the ones that will be working most directly with the new superintendent. So I mean, I guess I like the availability of an online survey as optional, but I also think that it would be great to reach out to all of those administrators.
So some of the groups, thank you, Kyle. Some of the groups that we always work with would be your administrator group. And that's sometimes and often separate from the district office group. The teachers and the classified staff, they all have separate individual meetings, and I would call those more private meetings than public meetings, although can be a large subset of, let's say, teachers. You know, they can have their own Zoom if they want, or they can have representatives. They can also go and be part of the public Zoom and or the Survey Monkey. Does that get at your concern or your question?
Well, I just want to make sure I understand that we'll be taking a subset, but I do want to kind of try to connect to all of the people that will be working with the new superintendent. So the people that interact and
so all
perhaps
teachers
have the clearest idea of what they want in a leader that works in the central office, but also that lead all of our buildings. And so I just want to make sure we have 40 buildings and we have so many talented people in the central office, and you know that's a very large Zoom, but wanting to make sure that even if it's in survey format, we are collecting all of their input.
I see. Okay. So maybe a separate Survey Monkey, if you will, for those individual groups. They actually have an opportunity. We don't collect names, first of all, but we do ask them to identify their position in the district, and they're sorted by those positions. So when the teachers go on to the regular Survey Monkey, they would check off that they're a teacher in the staff, and that group gets collated. And you'll see the responses from that group only, and the administrators only, or the district office only. But I'm not really clear if you'd like a separate Zoom meeting for each of those groups. So
I guess I just want to be very intentional of our efforts to collect feedback. And I don't want it to be such a cooled down group that we just have a group of 8 administrators. I want, I mean, we as board members have our insights and observations, but we're on the outside looking in, and it's very different if you're on the inside. And I just want to make sure that in this process, our stakeholder collection is very comprehensive with regards to those administrators.
So Kyle, can I just ask a clarifying, because I think I understand what you're saying, but I want to make sure. So in addition to the stakeholder groups where you might have a selection of, say, principals in that stakeholder meeting, but then also push out the survey to say all the principals to respond on the survey?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about almost in a sense like a 360 evaluation that would be sent out in regards to what do you want in a leader, what do you think about Vancouver Public Schools, but that it's an invitation pushed out rather than hoping that people remember to respond. And I think people are going to be diligent and take this seriously, but I just really think that those people that work on Falk Road and all of our building leaders are going to have some pretty important guiding advice for us in terms of what we need in leadership.
Sure. Clearly.
One of the other things that we can do, and we've done this in the past, is if we're invited to the administrative meeting, I'm sure they have Zoom meetings. You know, you have Zoom principal meetings, you have your, 39 site administrators, is that about right? 39 school sites. We can, you know, zoom in on that and have them all participate in, as you know, the survey. And I mean, that is very feasible. We've done it. I've done it in the past where we have all the site administrators in one meeting, and then we have all the district administrators in a different meeting. I think it'll touch with what Kyle is asking of us. But if you want us to send the Survey Monkey to everyone, that so long as we have emails, that's not an issue. We can do that without any problems.
Well, and it's not, I mean, we can't do a Zoom meeting with 1,300 teachers, unfortunately. Hopefully they're compelled to participate and share their feedback, but especially those site administrators and all people. I mean, I would really be interested in getting stakeholder feedback, not just at the executive level, but kind of all throughout our central office, and just because I think leadership, as we consider what's the right fit going forward, a lot of that comes down to climate and culture.
Sure.
And I think, you know, looking at kind of all levels of staff within the central office is what I'm thinking about.
So the teachers have an opportunity to participate in this process on multiple levels. They can go online and do the SurveyMonkey. We can have the association itself select a group of people. For example, they can have their building reps attend a Zoom. They can have all the building reps attend a Zoom. Then they also, I'm going to assume that you're going to have a representation on the stakeholder interview team. So they've got the interview, they've got their own private Zoom, and they've got the public meetings as well as SurveyMonkey. So they've got multiple layers of opportunity to participate in the process. And actually they can participate in multiple venues as well. So it doesn't matter. Same thing with all the other groups, the classified staff, the administration, the district office staff usually is part of all of those processes as well. So hopefully, and again, this is a process, it's kind of like building the plane as we go along. We have a structure and we're going to add pieces to it. And I think the board is going to go ahead and then send us information, and then we'll try to build it out and get it back to you. And if we'll get it eventually, but it may not be the first go around, but hopefully. I hope that answers your questions, Kyle.
I think it does so far. Are you
Okay.
looking for us to identify both groups and individuals?
So the standard groups are going to be administrators, teachers, classified staff, students, et cetera. Those are kind of standard. But what about your elected officials? Are you going to have the police chief, the fire chief, anybody within the community who is a community leader who you'd like to make sure you reach out and touch and have them part of the process? So those are the key individuals and groups. It could be a group. Maybe it's Salvation Army. Maybe it's your equity committee, which I'm sure you're going to have part of this process. But I'm looking for those non-standard things. The big swath, everybody is invited to the public Zooms. Everybody has a chance to do the SurveyMonkey. But you know, what are those groups that you want to have more private session with, so that they feel like the board is concerned and wants their input, and they're part of this process? By the way, it develops trust in the person you hire in the end as well. So this really does build a good foundation for that new person coming in.
One more question in regards to the public groups, and I'm asking because I want your feedback on this. I think it's great to have general sessions where it's open to everybody, but I just wonder, in our interest in connecting to some of our diverse community members, if we want to have any tailored sessions that is really, I mean, obviously a Spanish speaking session is somewhat tailored, but if we want to identify more tailored public sessions.
Okay.
Sort of like LULAC or NAACP, and then I forget, what's the name of the FCRC group that you work with the parents? What's that committee called?
Leadership Advisory Group.
That one, yeah. So things like that, those groups that tend to be marginalized.
Right. A perfect example of the kind of special or unique groups for your community that you want to reach out to. Although LULAC is not unique, they're all over. But that's exactly, I think, what we're talking about when we're talking to the board about what are those groups you want to touch? Who are they? And we'll just need to set up the meetings once you've identified those groups.
Mhm.
Yeah, good. Okay. Any other?
So,
Yes.
well, I'm just going to interject, and Kyle just type this up in the chat. There is a list of groups, and that's, I think, what Kyle referred to was in our briefing, that Tom and I imagine he's getting help too, are compiling a list of names for certain groups like the PTA Council and our labor groups and whatnot. And I believe the plan is to pass that along to you, Steve. So I'm just going to maybe remind the board members to go back and refer back to that list, because those people are already kind of being generated and provided for Steve and Aida to contact. So in addition to that list, if there are any groups that you would like to have on the list.
Okay, good. All right. So I'd like to talk for a minute, if we can, about advertising venues. In the contract proposal that you received, we have 30 days on the AASA, 30 days advertising on Top School Jobs, which is Education Week online, 30 days of advertising on the National Alliance of Black School Educators, 6 weeks of advertising on the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. That's a sort of a standard part of the bid process. However, my recommendation to boards when I'm working with boards is that we do it for the full time the position is open and posted, which is basically twice as much as that. It's under $1,000. That's not covered by the proposal, but it's my recommendation you do that. Why would you advertise for 30 days when the position's open for 60? You want to make sure it's out there for people to see for as long as it's open. That's my recommendation. Are there thoughts or concerns about that? I can get you the exact number, but it's not a huge amount of money.
I don't have any concerns, just as long as we get the exact number, so we know what we're saying okay to.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think it's a great idea.
Wendy?
I think there's definitely, or at least from my perspective, a desire to cast a big net, and that it means a longer window for advertising it so that we can capture as many highly qualified candidates as possible. I would definitely be more than willing to do that, yeah.
Okay, I'll get you that number.
Sure.
I'll try to get that to you tomorrow, and then we'll get this going as soon as possible. Good. All right. So we've covered stakeholder groups for now. Let's talk a little bit about the selection criteria. This is an area where I think we can talk a little bit tonight, but again, I think this is going to take a little bit of time. Again, you can develop your ideas and thoughts via email and ship them to me, and then we'll compile them and get them back and see that we've captured everybody's thoughts and ideas. We're looking for things, as I said earlier, what are those characteristics? Clear communicator, coachable, finance, instruction. What are those characteristics and qualities? And I think just to start, do any of the trustees have ideas or thoughts tonight so we can discuss maybe how they might fit in? Kathy, Kyle?
I have a lot of thoughts. It's a hard conversation to just dive into.
It is. And as I said, maybe it's best to have it done on email, and you can send them to me. And then we can, we'll share those lists out so that people can see what's going on out there. No decision will be made via email, but it's just a sharing of information to the entire board. But again, it's the kinds of things that we will be using to select the questions in the interview. And it also helps us in our vetting process. Because if in fact, let's assume a simple one, bond and construction, let's assume that that's something that's extremely important to everyone, then we can go through everyone's resume that has applied to see what kind of experience they have with bonds, with construction, with refinancing, those kinds of situations or those kinds of issues. That is in the process as well, but it also helps you think about how you're going to judge those individual candidates at the interviews. So it's this is a very important part of the process, and I don't want to rush it by just saying this is it tonight, but I just wanted to begin that process and get us down that path a little ways.
I
See-
know.
oh,
I think the other thing that is critical is it's not a criteria, but it's a qualification. Do you only want individuals who have a PhD or their doctorate to apply? Do you want someone who has superintendent experience? So you don't want someone who doesn't have that experience. So, I mean, those are, you know, two real simple qualifications that we can list that isn't part of the criteria, but it is a vetting area that we can review. So if someone doesn't have a doctoral, you know, we don't, you know, go ahead and do the background on them because that's not someone you want. But we need to know that. We need to know, is that what you're looking for? Are you looking for someone who has a doctorate? Are you looking for someone who has superintendent or assistant superintendent experience? Are you looking for someone that has been a teacher, that's been a site administrator, and, you know, has gone up throughout the ranks?
well, and that's Aida, that you actually were kind of said exactly what I was going to say. I think one of my questions for around this part of the process is a couple of things. I understand that you use these criteria to kind of filter out, you know, in selecting which candidates to bring forward to the board and which ones maybe not to. Is it included in the posting and the advertisement, some of these characteristics? I mean, obviously the qualification pieces, but in terms of characteristics,
Yes.
strengths and things like that, would it be
Yes.
possible to maybe send it to me and I can share it with the board, some sample postings
Yes.
we can see for
That would be helpful.
and then one of the things, I mean, I'm just going to jump in and start the conversation. I don't know where the rest of the board is on a doctorate. I don't know how important that is to me necessarily personally, but I think for me, having superintendent experience would rank very high. And I also think that having that experience as, like you said, Aida, a teacher, a building administrator, someone who has kind of worked up and really has a firsthand personal experience at various levels of the system would also rank very highly for me. That's me. I don't know where the rest of the board weighs in on that, but those would be two qualifications that I would definitely be looking for.
And I would agree with that. And I would go maybe a step further, and I don't know how specific we want to be, but I'd like to make sure that it was more than just a cursory, you know, just cursory experience. Like I taught for like a couple of years, and then I was a building administrator for a couple of years. And I'd like to see it be a little bit broader than that, if at all. I mean, again, new, I don't know how specific we can get, but that would be helpful to have somebody with in-depth experience at those levels.
Well, let me give you an example of a conversation I had today with a woman who was a teacher, went back and got her PhD in instruction, and wrote a book. Is currently an assistant superintendent for a district of 15,000. And so there's a person who has no building experience, never was a site administrator, but has a depth of knowledge and working knowledge of a district of approximately your size. And so districts around the country used to only do what we've been discussing here, and that is, we only want superintendents. In recent years, in the last few years, they have been selecting people who have come from district offices as well. So it's not been as exclusive. Now, that doesn't mean that's what you should do. You need to do what you want to do, and we will find those candidates that fit that criteria. I will guarantee that. We'll find very qualified people. Just to let you know, there are some people out there that have very interesting and unique experiences that may not have been a sitting superintendent, or maybe even in this case, a site administrator, but would be highly qualified.
That was my instinct, is I don't want to create too many disqualifiers, because I do think that sometimes people arrive ready to be in leadership roles and they could have taken a different path. So I think that there's opportunity to indicate preference, but I wouldn't want to eliminate candidates simply because they don't have the right letters after their name, or they didn't fill the right role. I mean, perhaps they've consulted in education for 20 years and have this wealth of research and experience. I just don't want to put too many disqualifiers in, and that's my preference.
Well, and that's
I
what
would say,
This is Kamara. Oops, sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Kamara.
I totally agree with what Kyle said. I feel the exact same way. I just feel like people get different opportunities for different reasons at different times. So I don't want to be too limited in that.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask, is how much of this is when we talk about like our preference, or like our ideal candidate would have, teaching background, or, something like that. But how much of that is just our preference or ideal circumstance versus, like what Kyle was saying, like a disqualifier.
Well, on the application, what we do is, when it's a preferred, we can say a preferred someone with district level superintendent experience or assistant superintendent experience, prefer someone who has a teaching background, site administration, and that's a preferred. So you don't disqualify individuals, but you let them know, here's what we're looking for, but we're not going to disqualify you if you can show us, with your resume, and after we look at their background, hey, this is an individual who just might fit the bill, who will come in and, we bring them forward, and then you all decide if you want to interview them.
Okay. Yeah, because I would hate to, I do have certain things that, are in my mind, but I would hate to eliminate an amazing candidate just because they don't check this one little box. And we don't get the opportunity to, meet with them. So
one qualification or I don't know, trait or whatever that I would really like to see is someone who either has experience or exceptional passion for developing equity programs, taking a school district and moving it towards using equity lenses and equity policy, and using the research that's out there. So I would like to see somebody that either has that experience or has a passion and an understanding of what that means. Not just somebody that says it, but somebody that's really shown to understand the hard work that needs to be done in order to move a district towards that direction.
Ironically, the woman I was talking about, that's her role in her district, is working for the equity programs and increasing the achievement of the underserved population of her district. So if we had said no, only superintendents, then she would not have been a potential candidate. So that's interesting. Yeah.
But Kathy, I would say that would fit under a criteria, because you want whoever is going to apply, they have to answer to all the criteria, how they meet that criteria. And when we speak to different references, we ask them, how does this candidate meet this criteria? And if the board wants to see someone who has experience in developing equity programs or policy, who has an understanding and passion for moving a district forward in this direction, that's how we state the criteria, and then they have to address it.
Yeah, and I really want to make sure that, because we all know that there's a lot of equity buzzwords floating around right now, and anybody could come in and have a great interview and use all the buzzwords, but not have the know-how how to push a district in that direction. So I want to make sure that it's somebody that has the know-how for it.
Yes, Kathy, exactly. And that's one of the reasons we need at least 2 weeks to do the vetting because we want to double check what they say in their letter of application. Is it really true or are they just using the words? So thank you for saying that. It's very important to us in the process.
So I do, I like the conversation we've had so far, and I'm going to put some more thought to it, and I'll send it via email. And I'm sure that either Steve, you or Wendy can synthesize it into, but I'm hoping, I guess I often learn from my colleagues to discuss it further. I'm hoping we can have a follow-up conversation around these qualifications just to bounce this back and forth.
I'm glad you brought that up, Kyle, because yes, the answer is we will have further discussion. You can have your own discussion. I'm happy to attend any of them if you would like. But what we do with this list of qualifications and criteria is we sort them and synthesize them and come up with, I don't know, let's say 6 or 8 highly important things. We keep the entire list, but we want to select out some very important pieces, like real work with equity and successful work with equity in a district or multiple districts. That's part of what Wendy requested, which is the position description. And we'll put that together and everybody, you guys will have the chance to say, you know what, we've got to have this thing. We missed it in the first few discussions. This we think is very, very important. I'm not sure how we missed it, but we did. And then we'll modify it and work with you before it gets posted and before we begin the sorting and the vetting process. But yeah, we're happy to have several discussions around this because this is really I see as the critical piece of the process. This is what the board will begin to use to really select their next superintendent. These are really important pieces. So thank you for sharing your desire to have multiple conversations, Kyle. Okay. Moving on.
I don't want us to leave without ensuring that, Wendy, you mentioned that you'd like to see some samples of criteria. So we'll make sure that I'll make sure I get it to Steve and then he'll send it to all the board members. I currently don't have your all's emails, or I would send them directly. So until I get more information, it's going to be going through Steve. Okay.
Thanks, Aida. Now, Wendy, at this point, we've covered most everything except compensation, which I understand the district wanted to have in closed session. But before we do that, what about additional questions or comments at this point? Could be on anything we've discussed tonight, could be the process.
This is Kamara. I would really like to make sure that, I mean, I didn't add my part in, but for me, what's really important is someone who can bring people to the table. Obviously, right now, you know, our district's really divided. Certain people want to go back to school, don't want to go back to school, feel like everyone has their own self-interest. So I think it's really important to find someone, you know, who can collaborate really well.
Thank you. That's very important. A uniter, I think, a person who has the ability to bring groups together. Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
It's a difficult time right now. This isn't just for Vancouver public schools. This is across the nation. The district I was talking about that didn't want to have any public meetings was in Alaska, and they're having huge issues up there. So it's not just here. And Aaron just chimed in that Pam, he sent the board members' emails, Aida, to Pam and I. So we'll get you that information.
So in regards to the schedule, it seems like, and I know you said that everything's flexible. It seemed like a good goal, but perhaps a little aggressive when I first read it. And I know that there are natural cycles to these searches, and we want to not be off cycle because then we won't be in a competitive position. So I recognize that, but just from your professional expertise, if things were to slide a little bit because we took more time at any one of these points in the process, is there kind of a drop dead date that you would say you really need to have your decision made, or we can't push it past X date? I mean, I'm assuming most superintendents or people looking for a superintendency understand the general cycle. So are we missing out on candidates if we push things out too far?
Well, I guess the answer is you're very competitive, and people are going to want to come to Vancouver Public Schools. It's a good job. It's a nice community. So people are going to go out of their way to meet your timeline. So that's first. Secondly, there is flexibility within this schedule, and we can also adjust it out a little bit. I wouldn't want it to go too far out, too much further out. But if, let's assume that something went longer in the process, we can readjust during our process and just notify all those people who have applied and reposted with the change timeline. So that's not a problem. We'd like to have a schedule, but if, things happen, and there's flexibility, and there's no negative reflection on a board or a district that has to make a change in the schedule. Excuse me, especially in these times. People can get sick, people can get quarantined, or their family can be sick, and so people have to be flexible.
So in the schedule, I'm just wondering, I was speaking to a former board member who was present during the last superintendent search, and one thing that caught my interest was visits. Now, obviously with coronavirus, we are limited to doing site visits, but she kind of informed just how much you learn by going to a current superintendent's current district and interacting with employees and teachers that currently work. And that seems like such an informative way to evaluate final candidates. So I'm wondering how we can work that into the process and how that can work over Zoom.
Well, there's several ways of doing that. In normal circumstances, you would just fly there, drive there, and go set up meetings and talk to individuals in the community and the school sites and district offices. But in these times, you're going to have to set up Zoom meetings with those groups. And we can arrange for that. We can help you with that. And that would take place after your interviews. Let's assume you have 2 top candidates and you want to get more information about them beyond just a second interview. You could then split up members of the board to have Zoom meetings with teachers associations, with board presidents, or board members, community members, teachers, whatever you'd like to do. It's actually probably going to be a little faster to do it via Zoom, just because you don't have to worry about travel. But I do agree, it's a very important part of the process.
Well, and I'm not, I trust your work doing the vetting and the reference checks, but it's just really that some people can interview really well, but just understanding where they are in their current district and
to use a personal experience that we're going through right now with applying to colleges. You can't just know from what you're reading from colleges that that's going to be a good fit for you. At some point, you have to step on the campus, and it's the same kind of feel. It's like, yeah, you look good, but what's the feel I get from where you've come from? I think.
Yeah, perfect. Exactly. Right. Go ahead, Aida.
Steve, I was going to say that can be worked on, like say the week after the interviews, and then, a decision doesn't have to be made until March. And then, that announcement being made either, are there 2 board meetings that you have a month, or do you only have 1 board meeting a month?
Well,
it depends. In September, we had 1 every week. So.
Right. So you can have a special meeting, and what we can put on the schedule is the decision will be made, or the announcement will be made on or about what is it, March 9. So that way it doesn't have to be March 9. It could be later, or it could be sooner.
Yeah, the only thing that, and I know this, in other states that the announcement, when you make, when the contract's signed, it has to be on a regular school board meeting. So
But the announcement doesn't have to be.
the announcement doesn't have to,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
contract signing and that. does have to be.
Yeah. So the announcement is basically we've selected this person, they've agreed, and now we're negotiating contract.
Yeah.
Which then has to be approved at a regularly scheduled meeting, published.
Mhm.
Right, so we have one regular meeting a month, which would be March
Okay.
9th.
Okay.
Action on things, yeah.
Okay.
So it could be April.
April.
Yeah,
Right.
but again, the person would be offered and accepted, and by April, the contracts would be signed
Signed and everything before.
to be approved in April at the board
Yeah.
meeting.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Wendy, I think we have the closed session Zoom. Is that what we're supposed to do, is leave this meeting and then reopen?
Yes, so we're going to move into a closed session, and there is a separate link for that closed session that you should have had emailed separately from the link that you used for this one. So we'll go ahead and move into that closed session now. We'll be in closed session for approximately, I'm getting the instructions from Aaron, sorry, for approximately an hour with no action to follow. All right, so thank you to the staff who hung around. Thank you, everybody, and have a good night. And we'll see the board, Aida and Steve, in closed session. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.